Yeah, I recorded it now. Um, cool. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Oxbridge-AIx Masterclass. We're super excited to get one of our heroes, Leeho, join us today. Leo's got some fantastic experience and he's really been quite kind to share them with us today. And hopefully there's a couple other masterclasses on our way. But Leeho, over to you.
Awesome. Hey everybody. Yeah, Uday, thanks for inviting me on to the masterclass series. Yeah, and today I guess I'll just be talking through a bit of my background, and then yeah, how I went about starting some of the startups that I did, a little bit about what I'm up to right now, and then I can talk about generally the I'd say it's a very loose framework that I like to use whenever I'm exploring different ideas. Yeah, and really just how I deep dive into profitable problems worth solving, or I wouldn't say profitable, but maybe worthwhile problems. I don't think it always has to have a profit bend to it, but yeah, so I guess just kind of kicking off with my introduction. I'm South Korean. I grew up in the States, and my affiliation to Oxbridge is I had ended up I did my master's, both my master's in computer science and the MBA over at Oxford. And in and around that, always just I had always been interested in entrepreneurship. So I have a background academically in computational linguistics, and so that was really the first startup that I ended up starting. It's a YC backed company called Encord, and really what we focused on and still focus on to this day was data annotation. So data annotation focused on more specific to the context of computer vision. We started out by finding a niche in video annotation, which I'll talk about later, and then we branched into all forms of data annotation, and then we branched even broader into model management, evals, which is a very hot topic right now, and of course, we still also offer our core product, which is data annotation. So that was the first startup that I started. I was the founder and CTO over there. And then the second startup that I started was a company called Parlan, which was, think of it as an infinite spreadsheet that acts effectively as a BI tool. And the underlying thesis around that was that if you had a spreadsheet that had, that could contain an unlimited amount of rows and do computation on an unlimited amount of rows, that would effectively be just the most powerful BI tool ever. You would have no need for Tableau or Metabase or any of these sorts of products. So that was also YC backed the second time. And unfortunately, that didn't last too long, but not for, I would say, commercial reasons, more for kind of interpersonal reasons with my co-founder, and I would say co-founder compatibility issues. But since then, I've then gone through, I would say, a series of just iterating and releasing products in very, very quick succession, only to now have recently started a company called Expedite, which is drastically different from any of the startups and the categories of startups that I've started in the past. But it's effectively an AI-centric immigration services firm, helping a lot of the companies that I've worked with immigrate over to the US. And that problem I can talk about, when I get into the framework a bit more. But that was really discovered through something else that I do on the side, which is quite a lot of angel investing. So I've angel invested in about 30 to 40 companies now. Some names of I'm sure maybe you guys have heard of. But the thesis has always been that we invest very early stage into a lot of these founders, and then a lot of these founders end up moving over to the US. And of course, they have a lot of questions when they do that. And so we've helped them sort their visas and then, of course, set up shop in the US. So that's a little bit about my background in a nutshell. So I would say part as a venture-backed founder, part as an early stage investor. So yeah, now that I've gone a bit over my background, I can talk about generally when I've started startups, what kind of how I go about first identifying a problem, then how I go about validating that problem, and then how I go about maybe finding the initial customers to selling that problem. So you can say somewhat of a multi-step process that I like to chop it up into. So on the first bit, how to go about identifying problems. I'd say, of course, there are a lot of notes, by the way, that Paul Graham writes on all of these subjects. So if you haven't already, in YC in general, so if you haven't already seen some of these pieces, I'd really advise that everybody do the YC Startup School, and also just dig around some of Paul Graham's essays. But of course, I think the best way to identify problems is to and maybe this is stated 100 times over, and all of you have heard this in some shape or form, is to just find problems that are closest to you, right? So whether that be in your research, whether that be in your daily lives, whether that be in some academic context, some work context, I would say that's probably a good place to start. So with the first company, Encord, that really started through a lot of the some academic research that I'd done, and at the time we were just annotating a lot of data manually. And so we figured, there must be some kind of a service or some kind of software to do this. Turns out there was, but then, as we started to dig more and more into this problem of data annotation, we figured that there were some data modalities that were underserved, right? So even if, for example, the problem that you face, and in my case, anecdotally, that I'd faced was already a problem that there were a lot of solutions that were being built to solve this problem. I think it still inspired, a different sort of kind of subcategory of annotation, just a different niche that we were able to really quickly pivot into. It just kind of gave us a base that we were able to use to then maybe dig around that base and then find other problems. In the case of Encord, actually, the data modality that we found that was quite interesting to then tackle first was any kind of sequential imaging. So in this case, it was videos. And then we found sort of a niche. I can talk about some of the initial customers and how we went about validating this problem next. But we saw that video was a really underserved category for data annotation, and in particular, we noticed that there's a trove of data that's just lying around in videos. If you think about a video, it can be anywhere from 60, 90, 120, even more frames per second. And that's a lot of images packed into a second. And so how can we think about a way to just capture all of that data that is just going to waste in, let's say, a 5-minute video where maybe only 50 of the frames in that entire video are being annotated. So that was, for an example of how we went about maybe identifying a problem with that framework that I use, right? Going over into another kind of case example, anecdotally, we for Expedite, kind of as I mentioned, we were angel investing in a lot of companies, and we noticed that we were sending a lot of these companies over to the same different service providers. We would send them over to a law firm that would help them with obtaining a talent visa. And we figured, hey, this seems to be a recurring problem for a lot of founders moving over to the US, irrespective of their nationality. And then once they get over to the US, they seem to then have a lot of problems with setting up a company in the US, hiring in the US, even doing very mundane things like finding an apartment in the US, finding a community. And so based off of that, we figured, well, maybe the first place that we'll start is something that we're quite comfortable with, right? Which was helping people obtain their talent visas. So we found different legal partners, and that's exactly what we're working on right now, which is Expedite. So once again, it was something that we were just exposed to within different within a work context, within the angel investing context, and decided to then try to spin a business out of it. And so, I would say, if you feel as though it's difficult to find inspiration from, some of the things that you're doing on in a day-to-day basis, I would say that I don't really have a good answer for that, other than to just to keep exploring, maybe like really just dissect in some kind of a mind map, maybe even just like physically write it out, the sort of different things that you might be exposed to, whether it be once again in some kind of a work context, a personal context, or something else. And then, just go down this list one by one. I myself also just formally have a list of ideas that come from just all these things I told you I've just faced in all sorts of different contexts. And then once again, I think then we kind of move on into the next phase, which is then how do we go about validating these problems? In the case of the annotation software, I think the validation, I kind of split into two steps. Of course, if it's a problem that you faced, I think the first step is really just kind of asking yourself earnestly. Of course, if you're just listing out a ton of ideas, some of the ideas might not actually be tackling problems that are truly pain points, right? Maybe you're trying to start a startup for the sake of starting a startup. Maybe you're not being so honest with yourself, and so you write down a list of different ideas that some of which don't actually solve true problems, right? So maybe the first question to then ask yourself, once you've identified a list of problems, is as you're going down this list, as you're trying to select the different things that you're working on, it's just having a very honest question with yourself and saying, hey, is this a product that I would actually use? And beyond actually using, is this a product that I would actually pay for, right? If I had exactly the feature set that I would imagine being built for this product that I've identified and this problem that I've identified, would I pay and just slap some arbitrary number on there? Would I pull out, $100, $500, even $1,000 a month on paying for this product? Of course, if the answer is no, then you move on onto the next idea. But usually, I'd say the products that I've founded in the past, they've all just passed that litmus test. Well, first internally, I would say, yeah, this is something that I am willing to pay for myself. And so let's go and see if other people are also willing to pay for this. And then comes into that second part of validating the problem, which is then just trying to get in front of the right stakeholder for the problem that you're trying to solve. And I would say a good heuristic is if you find yourself having a very difficult time getting in front of that customer base, that sort of customer profile, or that stakeholder that you imagine has this problem, it's probably not the right sort of fit for you to be solving. Just because I would not, I wouldn't underestimate how important go-to-market fit is when trying to sell and execute a product as well. And let me give an example, right? Maybe for example, there is some critical need of dental software out there, and dental software is incredibly dilapidated in some way, and dentists, we've identified that, okay, dentists have this problem, and we've even validated that dentists have this problem to some extent. I would have no way to comfortably reach that stakeholder. I don't have the conviction that I would. So it's probably not the right founder market fit type of problem for me to be solving. But yeah, as a good heuristic, if you find yourself having a hard time getting in front of a stakeholder to validate the problem set with, it's probably not the best fit. You could still, of course, I don't want to, have people coming out of this conversation or this presentation being dissuaded from chasing these sorts of products. But one thing to note is that it will definitely be much more of an uphill battle. So I would say, if you do have very, very solid conviction that you've run across this problem, and it's past that first test of validation in the sense that you would actually pay for this product. I would say if you have very, very, very strong conviction, and don't mind that it's going to be an uphill battle, if you don't have the right access to stakeholders, sure. I would say I don't want to dissuade anyone from going after that kind of a product, but I would just be mindful that, of course, it's not going to be easy to sell, and selling should not be overlooked by any means. I think just as a quick side tangent, there's this always. I feel like I always get into this debate with different folks in the industry, whether having some kind of product extra, whether it's more important to have a better product, or whether it's more important to be able to sell better. I think that there are kind of cases for both. But all of this is to say that of course, if you can't even get in front of the target that you wish to reach, of course, it's going to be very difficult to build a successful product. So yeah, I would say that's then on that's what I would say to sort of the second step of how you should validate problems. Of course, just to kind of recap. The first step is just an internal conversation when you're with yourself and your co-founders, and then the second is to just try to get in front of different stakeholders, and then try to be as unbiased as possible. But yeah, ask them. Start it off as a conversation, and I think this is always even the best form of a sales pitch, right? Just try to get an understanding of what their most pressing problems are. And then see if the problem that you've identified aligns with the problem that they feel is most pressing. And then based off of that, obviously you have maybe some kind of a form factor of what a product might look like to solve this problem in your head. And so then ask them, hey, look, if these are your most imminent problems, do you feel like, hey, maybe you don't ask them directly, but try to get at whether the solution and maybe the features that you're thinking of, the critical features of the solution that you're building, are tackling the problems that they're facing. And when I say critical features, I would say really just distill it down to maybe a few features, and ask, is like do this mapping exercise of, is feature A truly, what problem does it solve? And to what extent does it actually solve? Yeah, like to what strength, to what degree does it actually solve this problem? Maybe some critical problems that you've listed. This is all quite theoretical, but as an example, let's say I'm considering building at the moment I'm building this visa software, and so we can get into all these different features, such as I don't know, introduction AI, petition, visa petition introduction generation versus any other feature, just assessment, visa, talent visa, assessment generation, candidacy assessment generation, right? Well, you can ask yourself for that former feature, or even the latter feature, right? When we kind of dig into the weeds of each of the features, hey, what parts of this can we just do manually for now? Do we truly need something that would automate introduction generation? How complex is it to actually automate, the generation of an introduction for a visa petition? And then, you sort of ask yourselves, hey, like all these kind of, the two features that I'm thinking of building for trying to help people with applying to get a visa to the U.S. government. Well, does it actually solve, I think, the problems that they face? And then based off of that, maybe you just kind of get to this very, very, very elementary form of an MVP that you think you can build out. And once you've validated that against your stakeholder set, you find, okay, well, yeah, this is actually, feature A is very critically important for me to include in my MVP. Feature B, maybe not so much as I thought it would be, C, D, E, and then maybe you end up with a very light set of features that you need to then build out to just go and sell your products, right? And so that's how I would go about validating the product that you want to build and defining the features that you want to build. And then I would say maybe the third, then we kind of move on to the third bit is, well, then how do you go about finding your initial customers once you feel like you validated this problem? And I think the answer lies within actually the steps that you've gone through in your validation phase, especially when it comes to speaking with your external stakeholders. Of course, just always keep them in the loop. And then once you feel like you've solved their problems, you just want to go to some of the initial people that you've had conversations with. And I think the goal in this case is, of course, you do want to monetize as quickly as possible. But I think the monetization is really just, I think, a proxy to show how deeply you're solving their problems, right? So, you can get a sense of how deeply you feel like you're solving their problems, not by even just charging them immediately, but maybe you add very sophisticated logging and monitoring inside your product, and then you see, hey, these people are logging into our product every day. And we're offering them this product for free. I think it's this misconception. I know that a lot of people say, well, you want to just see how if they're willing to pay and if they're willing to pay quickly. But I think the reality is that it's really, I think it's not that easy, especially if you have, just such a bare bones product. And of course, that would be the strongest signal. But I would say, once again, there are other ways, right? So if you do decide, hey, I want to go down this road where I'm not charging them for my product, I would just add a very robust logging monitoring in your product and see how actively they're using your product, right? So if you see that they're interacting with your product every day, that they're deriving a lot of value from that, I think then you slowly start to kind of ramp up the payment engine, and then maybe you slap a paywall there, and you might face some churn. But I think that churn is really contingent upon, well, how deeply entrenched are they? How into your product? How badly do you feel like they need your product, right? So if you see them logging on and using your product maybe once a month or once every other month, and the intended usage that you have imagined is that they use the product once, just daily. Of course, when you slap on a paywall, the chances that they'll pay are highly, highly unlikely, right? So I would say it's I would say it's this game of trying to understand how frequently they're using your products, getting to some understanding of then how badly they need your product, how well it's solving the problem that they face, based off of you monitoring their usage, and then of course you then just slapping a paywall on there, and then maybe tweaking that paywall up or down based off of then, you know, how much you feel like they're engaging with your product. I think a good example is a product like 11 Labs. It's funny because 11 Labs started, you know, they actually originally had priced their product very, very cheap. And then they realized, oh, wow, people are actually deriving so much value out of this, much more than we had intended. And oh, actually, we had a really, really bad pricing structure. And so they've changed up their pricing structure to reflect, you know, of course, then making money and how much they thought that people, you know, actually needed their product. So I think that's, you know, then a good way to go about finding initial customers and then, you know, eventually converting them into paid customers. And then I would say beyond, you know, the initial conversations that you had with maybe some pilots that you've converted. I would say, you know, ideally they love your product enough to make referrals to other initial customers. But I would say then getting in front of your stakeholder, it's really then kind of contingent to the industry that you're working in and who your target persona is. And so, for example, you know, you can get very clever with it if you're trying to tackle early stage founders, right? Maybe what might make sense is throwing different kinds of startup events, you know, partnering with different VCs, and then, you know, getting in front of your stakeholder that way. If it is, you know, getting in front of different, let's say, like psychotherapists, like different sorts of clinicians, maybe a good way is to you know, just do some growth hacking tactic where you go on some kind of like yellow pages type of, you know, directory for psychologists, and then maybe you just cold outreach to them there, or maybe, for example, you try to partner with different types of you know, psychotherapy platforms that might help you you know, get you know, get easier access to psychotherapists. But I guess yeah, this is a bit more contextual to the product that you're starting and who your initial customer profile, who your target stakeholder is. So I wouldn't have really good advice there. But yeah, I guess that not to ramble on. Yeah, in summary, sort of a to find profitable problems worth solving. For me, I use this 3-step approach. You know, first, how do you identify a problem? Then how do you validate a problem? And then how do you sell or find customers for this for a product that you've built towards the problem that you're trying to solve? Yeah, and then once again, identifying problems. Once again, it's usually just the problems that are closest to you as a set of co-founders, and then really just weeding out what you think are true problems. Validating the problems. Validating, you know, validation happens first with yourself and your co-founders, and asking yourself these honest questions anecdotally and seeing if you pay for it, and then, you know, going about external validation. And initial customer acquisition is, once again, not really thinking about trying to monetize too much at first, but reaching out to some of the stakeholders, trying to get them to use your product, offering a free product, you know, being meticulous about how you're monitoring and logging usage, and then eventually kind of cranking up the payment dial, and then yeah, trying to find different partners and clever growth hacking solutions to then expand beyond that. But yeah, that's my presentation. And yeah, Uday, I'll pass it to you. I guess there's a Q&A as well.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dave. That's really fun. There's a Q&A, and everyone just you know, raise your hands or just put your questions in the chat. I do ask that you introduce yourself and turn your video when you do ask questions, but to get things started, I I have a couple of questions here, if you don't mind. Going through the examples with the 3 startups that you've done, right? And specifically, would it be possible for you to share within these 3 steps an example from each of your startups?
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to do so. So within each of this, maybe I won't go through, for each step, and then take you through each startup, because I think it'll be quite a long explanation. But I'll address maybe one of each, for example. Yeah, back to identifying problems. The first step when we were at Encord, prior to Encord, just the founding of Encord, my co-founder had done some research at a medical lab at Imperial, and then I was doing I was working with the dermatology group as well, at a medical school, helping them with data annotation of different skin lesions. And we were just doing a lot of this annotation manually. And so we figured, wow, well, there has to be some better software for us to just just go through this process a bit easier. And so we did some digging around different vendors, and it turned out that there was Scale AI, which was the leading vendor at the time, but they hadn't outsourced their software platform. Of course, this was quite sensitive data that we were dealing with, and so we couldn't just punt over a data set for Scale to annotate and then give back to us. Nor did we have as much of a budget to do so. And so that was the foundation of identifying, hey, we want to broadly do something within data annotation. And then how we went about maybe validating the problem, and then actually just refining the product even more, was we started to then go to different conferences, medical conferences. We started to ping different AI researchers that we had access to. And it just so turns out that one of the people that we had spoken to, which ended up being our first customer, was a gastroenterology group over at Guy and St. Thomas Hospital with King's College. And they had a ton of video data actually that they needed to annotate. They're like, hey, yeah, we have your problem where we have to manually annotate a lot of this data, but actually it's magnified because for us it takes form in videos, and we just have hours of different videos of endoscopic procedures. So they had struck this arrangement with us where we were then helping them annotate these videos. It's kind of gross because we were just looking at colonoscopy videos on repeat for like months. But eventually that allowed us to then build our product, service them, help them annotate their data, and then of course they became our first customer, and we ended up paying us, and that was the inception story there. With Expedite, I guess it was a bit more straightforward. I told you guys about the identification of the problem, which was just angel investing in a lot of companies, and saying that a lot of them needed help going over to the US. And then, the validation was quite simple, because, we would just go over to different founders and say, well, are you thinking of, is moving to the US a consideration? And all of them would say, well, yeah, 100% at a certain point. I mean, and they would even kind of scoff at us, and they'd be like, that's a stupid question. Of course, we're thinking of moving to the US at some point. If our company, if it's not now, it's definitely at a certain point in which our company reaches a certain scale. So the US is maybe a no-brainer market for us to tackle at some point. And so we thought, okay, well, that's pretty straightforward then. And then, we would then just go back to them and say, well, when are you going to the US? When you're going to the US, can you just let us know? And then they'd let us know, and we'd, help them sort out their visas to get to the US. So yeah, those are 2 examples. I guess, yeah, I did give 2 examples of all 3 steps.
Thanks. I also wanted to ask you, like, because you also started a venture studio or product studio,
Yeah.
and over the past like year and a bit, I've heard you work on things with LinkedIn, worked on Typeform stuff, and now
Right.
Expedite. Would you mind sharing a bit of that journey?
Yeah. I'd say a lot of those products, I mean, I can go through those journeys, and I think a lot of them ended up failing. But when you fail, I would say fail quickly. So for us, with Opsin, with the product studio that we had, we tried to release a few different products. We released Vofo, which was just turning um, forms into conversations, and then the idea is that you would have some kind of an online form. You would feed it into a voice agent and have it consume the context of the form. Then you would have an API where you can just punch a number and it would give a call, and then just run through all the form questions in a natural conversation, and then record all the answers against whatever sort of schema that you define, and then you could export that schema, however, into a JSON file, into a CSV via consumed via API, pulled via API. And that I think we tried to validate that problem. So the identification of the problem was that hey, look, for us, we want to be able to collect a lot of this market research data pretty quickly. And this actually, the idea came through a friend of mine who is now working at a market research company called Statista. Maybe you guys have heard of them. And so they, of course, just need to collect data all the time. And so how we then went about validating the problem was that we then tried to just reach out to a ton of market research firms. But then we found, once we released the product, well, a few things. We had difficulty getting in front of the right stakeholders, even though, my friend was working at Statista, and I myself, well, I don't really have a background in this industry at all. So we just found it very, very difficult getting in front of the right stakeholders. And then to the stakeholders that we did release to, we just found that they weren't really engaging with the product as much. And we interviewed them, and it just seemed like we were getting really dead end answers. And so I think that was just the sign to fold that startup. I mean, we started another product called Engaged, which we thought in theory would be amazing because it was just some kind of a social media auto engagement tool. Once again, same identification process. Hey, look, I'm a founder. I post on social media a lot. It'd be nice if I could just automate away a lot of my engagement. So I think I told myself, well, yeah, I'd be willing to wait. I'd be willing to pay $10 a month for this, and I already do for some products. But then I think once we tried to validate this and then release this with the form factor that we had, we just realized that no one cared for the form factor. So the solution was a bust. The problem was still there. But I think the solution was a bust, and we didn't have conviction that we could, actually build out the solution that we would actually need to truly solve the problems of the different ICPs that we've identified. So we ended up abandoning that product. All these products, though, that we had built, Vofo, Engaged, etc. We spent maybe a month maximum building all these products out, and it was through that feature identification process that we talked about, where we did that mapping exercise of, hey, is this feature actually solving this problem, and is this problem actually critical? So yeah, are these problems actually critical? And then are these features, each one of these features, actually solving the problems that we've identified are critical? And I think through that, we were able to create a very, very minimal MVP for each of the products. For the form product, for example, we could have gone crazy with all the integrations. We could have built out integrations for Google Forms, Typeform, Qualtrics, whatever, you name it. But we decided to keep it incredibly lean. We were like, well, all we need to validate with this is Google Forms. Of course, we could have gone on a more foundational level, and we could have trained different text-to-speech models, voice models, and we could have gone down that rabbit hole. But we decided not to. It didn't really make sense in terms of validating the idea. Of course, we could have then also gone down this rabbit hole of allowing for a ton of different export formats, role-based access control for different organizations and users and permissions into organizations. But all of that didn't really matter in terms of just distilling down to what we thought were the core problems that people had. If that makes sense, which allowed us to just be very, very nimble in the way that we shipped products. And it took us, once again, less than a month to build out all of these products, and then just ship them, each of these products, I should say, and ship them. Yeah.
That's really cool, because I can see how this completely fits in with Expedite. All of these things you built, it completely is useful for Expedite. You mentioned just now about conviction. I think that's really important. Having conviction in either the problem, the solution, or the market. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of founders either get drawn to an opportunity, or they get drawn to obsessed with a solution. You've obviously given us a really good framework, which is like a very classic customer discovery to validation to output. But love to hear your thoughts on, your lens on conviction.
Well, I think conviction is everything, in the sense that conviction is probably what will fuel you to keep working on your product. But I would say, blind conviction is probably the worst thing that you can do for yourself and your business, in the sense that you're just wasting your own time, and you're of course, you could be just running into a dead end with your business. So I would say, to the extent that you should have conviction, the conviction should come from, of course, just following the steps that I've mentioned. And then just trying to get feedback as quickly as possible about your product that should then fuel your conviction more and more, right? So the conviction should not be blind. The conviction ideally should just be rooted. It should be grounded in some kind of evidence.
Cool. I'm going to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, hi. Do we raise our hands, or can we?
Yeah, you can. Go for it.
Hi, Leeho. Thank you again for the presentation. I had a quick question on I'm very new to kind of all of this. This is one of my first kind of start calls. So sorry if this question sounds a bit silly, but you mentioned,
of course,
being closer to the problems that you're solving. Just a bit of background on my educational history and everything. Affiliation Cambridge, studied natural sciences, had a natural sciences pre-med background. Currently working in B2B sales. In true honesty, not selling a product that I'm super passionate about. It was more just to learn a skill set. I just had a question about how to best position yourself in kind of environments that I'm not someone super technical. For me, it would always be the go-to-market side, and kind of true interests lie in helping children with neurodiversity, really working in that space. Now, currently, why I'm in this role is to practice the skill set of actually being able to sell, a lot of just again building that skill set. Do you have any advice about how to, kind of years down the line, how I'm thinking about this, to best position myself in environments where, am I meant to be close to the cause? Am I developing a skill set, or how I should perhaps think about that? And you also mentioned something about not being too stuck on a problem, letting that problem come to you, and how you kind of think about positioning yourself in environments where you're helping a cause that you want to, but then also having the ability to, in my case, still sell and develop that skill set, and how I could perhaps constructively think about that. Thank you.
Right. Sorry. So the first question was, how should you think about, positioning yourself in some way where, you're either maybe exposing yourself to problem sets that you'd actually want to tackle down the line, versus maybe exposing yourself to skill sets that you feel like you might need down the line. Did I distill that down correctly, or did I?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Ideally, if you can, I would say maybe the doing kind of tackling two birds with one stone would be the most ideal, right? So if you could find some kind of a sales role within some sort of a problem space that you solve, that you'd really want to work on down the line, and find some kind of a company that is already operating in that space, that would of course be the most ideal. But then I would say beyond that, I mean, that's actually a tricky question. But yeah, I would say, yeah, in this case, I would say, really kind of honing in on, maybe not necessarily the, and I imagine, this is all within the context of startups and eventually starting your own thing. So maybe developing the skill sets for the skills that you eventually would see yourself pursuing, the different roles that you'd see yourself pursuing within a startup. I would think that would actually take precedence over then working on, so long as it's not something that's like super deeply technical. And I think that there's some context that should be taken into account here when we talk about the sort of like this problem spaces that we'd want to solve. But I would really prioritize then the skill sets. And then to the extent that you can maybe explore the industries that you are interested in outside of your day-to-day role, I think that's maybe how I personally would go about sort of juggling the priority between skills versus maybe industry that you'd want to work on down the line. I'd say at the end of the day, there are a lot of different skills that do map, that translate very well from industry to industry. It's more just I would say sales, for example. I find that the motion, going through, let's say you're doing some kind of like really heavy top-down sales, where you have like a ton of different sales reps, and you have to think of a sales strategy, whether you're operating within a B2B SaaS context, whether you're operating within a health tech context. I imagine that the broad strokes of selling top down are very, very similar across one industry to the other. So I would prioritize the skill set, and then maybe dive into the industry in some hobbyist way. And then once again, ideally it would just be that you kind of work on the you kind of tackle both at once, but shy of that, that's how I would go about it. Yeah. Sorry. Yep. Did that answer the question? Was that?
No, it did. It's also just regarding like further education and like whether, again, to like which, like ideally it would be tackling both, like two birds with one stone, is that the saying? But like really that take. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Leeho, do you mind if I chime in on this as well a little bit?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like one thing, sales I think is actually like the most useful skill that one can have in life, because you're basically always communicating and selling. And what Leeho just said, like, so my first sales job was in medtech, in healthcare, and I was taught from a B2B angle, but then I even had to sell bicycles in Zimbabwe. It's like so you have I think it's a really, really powerful thing, and I completely agree with Leeho. Another thing I would say, in addition to what he's saying, is that when you are kind of like, so I gamify my life as an entrepreneur and think of like leveling up and trying to get there, because it is a constant journey of growth. But one thing in terms of like working with others is just being exposed to many different ways of trying to tackle different problems. I find is also quite interesting and useful. So go to market, which is what you said. I don't know if Leeho would agree, but like there's so many different ways to go about it. And sometimes it's just ideas, and you just don't think of them, but seeing other people do it. We have Finley who's crashing with me here at HQ, and he did something with Product Hunt and just working with his different the company that he's also working with is a YC startup. So it's you just pick up ideas from as many people as possible. And what I really like about your style, Leeho, is like you just try so much. You try so many different things, and I kind of think that's really fun thing. We have Hannah Yin with a question as well. And I think Peter, do you have a question? I saw your hand raised for a second.
Yeah, I did have a question, but I'm gonna go last if that's fine.
Cool. Hannah Yin.
Cool. Thank you so much. So just a quick intro of me. I'm Hannah Yin, and I recently joined the Oxbridge-AIx team. So I'm the events and product manager. And no, thank you so much for your masterclass and talking us through your journey. It was really interesting to hear all your experience. I especially thought it was interesting to hear about the video and the data annotation because I have a background of video, so it's interesting to combine those two worlds. But my question is more related to, you mentioned you're an angel investor, so I thought it was really interesting just to hear like what have your learnings been from working with these startups or investing in these startups, and any takeaways from that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So definitely a few learnings from both an operating capacity, but also an investing capacity. So I'd say, yeah, I guess I've had the privilege to invest in, of course, founders that have done very, very successfully, and of course a lot of founders that have failed. I've backed the founders of Cohere. I've backed the founders of Monzo on their next venture, the founders of TripleByte on their next venture. We've done Perplexity. We've done SpaceX, although at a later round. So yeah, quite a lot of different companies across the spectrum. And I would say, yeah, probably for me, in the beginning, it was really just trying to get a sense of, and of course, my goal in angel investing is both, because it allows me to, for the reasons that it allows me to keep a pulse on the space. I get to support, especially if they are friends that I've known, I get to support, different friends, colleagues, entrepreneurs that are building cool things. But of course, I wouldn't lie. It's not purely altruistic. There's a profit incentive as well. I wouldn't just kind of throw money away if there weren't. And so I would say, in terms of what I've seen with a lot of successful versus unsuccessful founders, I've looked across maybe like, different factors, right? So I've looked at, for example, like, is it helpful that they're a repeat founder? And, if they're a repeat founder, does it really matter how successful their company has been? And I would say, that for example, and I'm just going, just off the top of my head with this answer, but, one thing that was pretty surprising to me was that, you'd think that, hey, if this person has started a unicorn company in the past, maybe they would just have, maybe they'd just be able to repeat this pretty easily again, because of course they've done it before. And that's not the case. So I've backed a few different founders who have founded unicorn companies in the past and ended up completely flopping their second companies. On the flip side, I've invested in first-time founders that have now been able to scale their companies into like exactly close to unicorn territory, I would say at this point. And so I guess if I were to say, like, one factor, it's a bit of a loose factor because it's hard to quantify. But for me, it's really just been just this tenacity and grit that a lot of these founders have. And so the type of founder where you're always, you're wondering, they're responding to you at like really odd hours of the night. At the same time, somehow you're like, hey, how are they getting like 101 things done? But also just always posting on social media, but also their product velocity, they are shipping like every other day. They just seem to have like insane time management, and also are just exactly like very, very focused on and kind of prioritize such that their output is just like this like crazy optimal output that I myself could never achieve. So yeah, I would say that that's maybe the factor that I've seen is the strongest. But once again, it's more qualitative. It's, you know, I don't really have like a good, I haven't necessarily like formalized this framework. Otherwise, of course, I would be retired and just, you know, like doing this full time. But I would say like loosely, that's kind of what I found. Those are some of the key takeaways. Like grit is just so important. Attitude is so important. You know, whether somebody has founded a company in the past and whether that has been a successful company or not, really, I found has no bearing. You know, old or young, that also has no bearing. I've invested in, you know, for example, like the chief risk officer of, you know, like one of the largest banks in the world, who's then started a lending platform that ended up going bust. I've also invested in founders that have, once again, absolutely no experience. This is their first time, and they have maybe like an internship within the domain of the problem that they're trying to tackle, and are doing wildly successful. So yeah, those are probably the key takeaways that I would say I've learned. Yeah. And then once again, yeah, I would say then the way that's kind of that I've taken that, you know, those examples into the way that I build. Yeah, I would say some of the other things that I've noticed are, you know, some of the companies that have escaped death are just, you know, those that once again just have incredibly high shipping velocity and are quick to pivot, right? So not too attached to exactly what it is that they're building, and they're able to just, you know, weave in and out of a lot of conversations, and then, you know, just shipping really quickly. So I've tried to take this advice as well. I think you're always fed this, and for me, I've always thought, well, you know, that's not true. I would say for Parlan, for example, the second YC company we did, I was like, okay, well, I'll take a radically different approach. We're just going to try to build for 6 months, and then we'll see how things go. And, you know, of course, we'll have these conversations along the way. But I think, you know, we'll really, because it's a spreadsheet product, we have to make a really good spreadsheet. I tried to go down that avenue. It didn't work out so successfully for myself. So I would say, yeah, the takeaway that I then got from angel investing and looking across so many of these companies is that they were just able to ship super quickly. And, you know, when they felt like it wasn't working out, and maybe that's a loose, you know, like wasn't working out. It's quite loose. What does that actually mean? But in one way or another, when they just felt like they, you know, maybe weren't getting enough traction for their product, it was a very quick pivot. So yeah, it's just spitballing off the top of my head, but I would say those are probably three things that I've noticed in successful founders. I've noticed in successful in founders that have not necessarily been successful, like surprising takeaways, etc.
And Leo, I want to be mindful of your time, but we have a question from Peter. And I also wanted to sneak in another question potentially based on what you were saying. It's like speed is king, right? What are your thoughts on how? So I myself remember doing everything I could to survive as long as possible, making my money last. How do you feel about that mindset versus this mindset of just going for it, you know, and being very fast? And
So sorry, can you say that again? It cut out.
sure. So what you've just been saying is how, you know, when you talk about velocity in particular, speed is king. That's how I like to say it. And I remember back in 2018 and 19, I was doing everything I could to survive, making my money last as long as possible, thinking I'd be fighting. But I've learned that that's not actually that's not a good thing at all, in my opinion. And I'd love to get your input and thoughts on like speed versus, because there's a mindset that a lot of people have is like, we have X amount of money, how do we make it last? Versus just going for it.
Well, I would say you should still be mindful of how you spend, right? And whether you feel like every single dollar that you put in would have, you know, what goal that would achieve, right? So so I would say, yeah, I mean, if you feel as though you're you know, I would say don't just spend blindly. But you know, if you feel like, hey, you have to spend like some amount of money for this conference that you feel like is high signal. Of course, you should be frugal and find different ways to get discounts, and be as hacky as possible, right? But at the same time, if you feel like not spending money will be detrimental in any way, or have you miss out on a big opportunity, I think that it's always just sort of a cost benefit, right? Yeah, but once again, the cost benefit should really just be anchored on, and maybe this is how I would frame it, is the cost benefit should just be really anchored on, hey, just be methodical about it. Hey, here's this KPI that we're trying to hit. Here's what we're trying to achieve. Is what I'm spending going to helping me here? And also, once again, weighed against my alternatives, right? So if you feel like, hey, we're making this higher, we're making this design higher, maybe as a classic example that I've seen a lot of founders face, and I've definitely faced this myself as well. Do we really need somebody that will design the sexiest, shiniest product for us right now? Does it really help us get to this initial goal that we need to prove whatever traction or win over this customer? Or do we feel like we can punt that until later? Do we feel like we can find a cheap alternative? Do you need this super shiny marketing asset, a marketing landing page that you pay, say like $20,000, $30,000 for, to get designed by some agency, versus an alternative template? Do you feel like you need to truly invest a lot of engineering resources that you're spending thousands of dollars or pounds a month on building out like settings features, or like organization invite features and things like that, when there are more pertinent features to be building? Do you feel like you need the strongest like servers to support what it is that you're doing, right? Or do you think that you can prove whatever you're initially kind of seeking out to prove with lower tier servers that might have some latency, but at the same time would be significantly cheaper for you guys to uphold? I think that I've given you guys like questions of like very practical scenarios that I've found myself in, and exactly maybe just how you should go about thinking about how you're spending your money.
Thanks, Leo. Peter, do you want to ask a question? I actually have to run. I hope you don't get, but Hanian's here because otherwise I'm going to miss a meeting. But yeah, you guys could just leave when the time is right. Leo, thank you so much. This has been epic.
Of course.
And I'd love to talk about the event on the 3rd as well.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be really epic. So please mention that before you leave.
Hi, Leo. Peter here from London. I'm actually trying to build a venture studio, and I've gotten real good interest in, like startups coming up and how they can solve problems. But I'm just interested to find out, like, when you started your product studio, why you found it wasn't successful, and maybe some tips to avoid failing in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the thought around the product studio was that we would just try to ship products as quickly as possible. And we just had this laundry list of products that we went down this laundry list, and we said, okay, we'll let's go down these ideas. Let's apply that first filter that I talked about. So what are problems that we think are very, very honest problems that we ourselves feel like are actual problems that we'd pay for. And then we started to go down. And for each of them, we also did this exercise where we thought, okay, well, if we see these as true problems, and we thought of like these minimal features for each of the different ideas that we created, which products do we honestly think would take us a month or less to build, that we think that we can monetize with? And so we then just went for it, and then we started to build out these products. I would say for a product studio, The tricky thing is then timing the go-to-market with the building. And the way that we did it was we had the go-to-market always lag the product development, right? So we would build out a product, we would move on to the next product, we'd market the previous product, we'd then kind of build another product, then kind of market that the previous product, and so on and so forth, right? Where the go-to-market was lagging the product development, just by a single product. And you would double down on your winners and you would abandon your losers, right? So let's say, for example, as we were doing go-to-market on one product, and that way you're not bottlenecked. As we were doing go-to-market for one product, we saw that it just wasn't getting any traction. So we figured, okay, let's just not waste our time. And then you should have a decent sense of whether or not you're able to sell this product and whether it could get maybe decent traction, I would say, with maybe a month or two for these products, right? And doing go-to-market, I guess you could do go-to-market in parallel for two products at once as well, depending on the sort of growth motion that you're going for, the sales motion that you're going for. But yeah, really 2 months should be enough time for you to, especially if you've released like a very, very light MVP, to see at least the initial signs of whether people actually care about your product or not. And then once again, you just double down on your winners and you start to abandon your losers, and then you start to then accumulate this portfolio of products. And once again, with all of this, though, I would say that validation phase is quite critical. And if you feel like the product isn't working out, don't sink so much time into it. Don't go building all these crazy features. But I think what's really, really critical with the product studio model is just truly, pinpointing and identifying true needs and being very, very light with the features that you build, right? You don't want to go too crazy. And then, of course, there are a lot of things that you can then translate from one product to another, right? A lot of just general app scaffolding and things like that. But that's probably the advice that I would give for how you could go about the product studio, Peter.
Cool. Thanks. Makes sense.
Yep.
Like you had a waterfall approach in the different kinds of tasks, like from development to go to market.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yep.
Cool. Does anyone have any more questions? And if you're too shy to ask on camera, we do have the chat. And give people a minute or two. Okay. Might not have any more questions. Leo, do you have any final bits you want to end off on, or?
No, other than, if anyone is, I guess as people are just going through their journeys, if I can be helpful, you can all just add me on LinkedIn. I can give out my my email, WhatsApp, whatever. Just feel free to contact me. I'm always, happy to do a virtual chat, grab coffee, whatever it is, and try to be helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for everyone who's attended and learned a lot from this session. I know I have. We did want to quickly mention, Leo, you had another session coming up, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a few events coming up. If you guys are interested, and if you have different ideas that you want to, if anyone is building in voice, we have one event that's coming up on September 3rd, and it's a voice AI pitch night. We have another hackathon that's coming up as well, and that's within trying to just create more performant AI through just trying to get models to take in more context. And that's I'm just getting all the links over here. Those are the two events. So if either of those events sound relevant to you, I've posted them right now in the chat. feel free to take a look and sign up if you think they're relevant. If you feel like you'd want to just battle test different ideas, or just you have a product that you're building and you just want a space to collaborate with other people, meet people that are building, facing similar challenges, technical challenges. If these can be helpful for you at all, feel free, please apply. And I think drop a note saying that you're from Oxbridge-AI as well.
Cool, thank you. And I also wanted to say some things from Oxbridge-AIx, that we have one event coming up this Friday, the 22nd of August, which is the female co-founding matching, which will take place in London. If people, we have comms going, so you'll probably see those. And then our next masterclass is on, I think it's Monday, the 1st of September. I should have the title up. Oh yeah, Idea to MVP, AI vibe coding. So if any of those also interest you, there will be comms coming out in all the channels. But yes, if people are interested. And yeah, no, thank you so much again. I think that's puts everything to a close. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.